The ding-dong ditch tragedy. When childhood pranks turn fatal, every neighborhood in America carries its own quiet rituals. There are the clattering sounds of children on bicycles at dusk, the hum of lawnmowers in the late afternoon, and the sudden peals of laughter that echo between suburban houses long after the sun has gone down. For generations, children have carried out mischievous games that blur the line between innocence and annoyance. One of those games, so familiar, so universal, is known by many names: Ding Dong Ditch, Knock Knock Ginger, or simply Doorbell Ditch. The rules are simple. Run up to a stranger's house, ring the doorbell or knock, and sprint away before the door opens. It is an act of fleeting mischief, rarely malicious, often silly. It leaves children breathless with laughter, sometimes leaves homeowners irritated, but rarely does it lead to anything worse than a scolding. In most communities, it is as harmless a rite of passage as tossing a ball through an open window or sneaking an extra cookie before dinner. But on a humid August night in Houston, Texas, in the summer of 2025, this timeless prank ended not in laughter, but in tragedy. What should have been a fleeting act of childish fun was transformed into a nightmare. An 11-year-old boy named Julian Guzman, bright and mischievous, would not return home. His life, filled with promise, was cut short by a gunshot that silenced laughter and replaced it with screams. At the center of this tragedy stands a man, Gonzalo Leon Jr., a 39-year-old homeowner whose reaction to children's antics shattered a family, rattled a neighborhood, and ignited debates across the nation. He claimed fear, claimed self-defense, claimed the sanctity of his home. Yet the echoes of that gunshot linger as a chilling reminder of what happens when fear and firearms intersect in a moment of poor judgment. This is not merely the story of one child's death. It is the story of a community shaken to its core, of parents left clutching photographs where children once stood, of a justice system struggling to reconcile law with morality, and of a nation divided over the question of when, if ever, pulling the trigger can be justified. Julian Guzman was born into a family that cherished him deeply. At just 11 years old, he embodied the carefree spirit of childhood. His teachers described him as curious, sometimes restless, often quick with a joke that could break the tension in any classroom. His friends saw him as daring but kind, the one who would take the first step into a prank and then share the blame when adults came asking questions. At home, Julian's mother often said he had an old soul, able to comfort her with words far wiser than his years. But Julian was also, simply, a child. He loved video games, his bicycle, playing tag until the streetlights blinked on, and goofing around with the neighborhood kids. Mischief was part of his charm. He never crossed into cruelty. He was more interested in laughter than in causing pain. To his family, he was their anchor, the little brother, the cousin who could make everyone laugh at family barbecues. On that August evening, Julian's day had been ordinary, too ordinary, in hindsight, for anyone to expect the horror that awaited. He had eaten dinner, rushed outside to meet his friends, and joined in a timeless game, running, knocking, laughing, hiding. It was supposed to be one of those nights that blurred into memory, marked by giggles and scoldings and nothing more. Houston in August is stifling. The air clings like a wet blanket, heavy with humidity, pressing down on children who nevertheless run tirelessly. The neighborhood where Julian lived and played was unremarkable: modest single-family homes, trimmed lawns, the occasional barking dog behind a fence. Families there lived side by side for years, waving at each other across driveways, borrowing sugar, and keeping watch over each other's children. But beneath the surface of suburban normalcy was a climate of unease. Houston, like much of Texas, had seen rising debates about crime, safety, and gun ownership. Neighbors whispered about break-ins, about suspicious cars parked on corners, about whether the world was as safe for their children as it had been decades earlier. Some responded by double-locking doors. Others, like Gonzalo Leon Jr., responded by keeping firearms close. That neighborhood, on that night, would become the epicenter of a national story. But for Julian and his friends, it was just another playground. The game of ding-dong ditch has been around for centuries in some form. Anthropologists trace it back to playful pranks in rural villages, while modern parents recall playing it themselves in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. It thrives on adrenaline, the racing heart, the anticipation of escape, the delight in fooling an adult, if only for a moment. That night, Julian and a few other children took turns. One would sneak up, knock or press the doorbell, then sprint back into the shadows. The others stifled laughter, waiting for the door to creak open. Then they would scatter, the street alive with echoes of sneakers pounding pavement and breathless giggles. They had done this at several houses already, met with nothing more than silence or a homeowner peeking out suspiciously before retreating. The children, emboldened, decided to try one more house before heading home. That house belonged to Gonzalo Leon Jr. Leon was a 39-year-old Houston resident, described by some neighbors as quiet, by others as standoffish. He lived alone, with his home secured by locks and, more importantly, by firearms. Texas law permitted him to keep weapons, and he was not shy about his comfort with using them. To friends, he sometimes spoke about crime in Houston, about his belief that one had to be vigilant, about the Castle Doctrine, the state's law that allowed homeowners to use deadly force if they felt threatened inside their own property. But what Leon faced that night was not a burglar. It was not a home invasion. It was not a masked intruder. It was a group of children playing a prank. Inside, Liam reportedly carried his firearm with him as he answered the knock. He claimed later that he did not know who was outside, that he feared for his safety, that the darkness concealed potential threats. But the decision he made in those moments was not defensive. It was aggressive. And it was catastrophic. Accounts gathered from witnesses and investigators paint a chilling picture. Leon opened the door with gun in hand. The children, seeing the firearm, scattered instantly, their laughter snapping into screams of panic. Leon raised the gun and fired once into the air, a so-called warning shot. The crack of the bullet echoed across the street, startling neighbors, sending children into blind panic. But then came the second shot. This one was not fired into the sky. It was fired directly at the children fleeing into the night. The bullet struck Julian Guzman in the throat. In an instant, the game ended. Julian collapsed on the pavement, clutching his neck as blood seeped through his fingers. His friends screamed for help, their voices shrill, carrying down the block. One child, trembling, used a cell phone to dial 911. Another ran to Julian's house, pounding on the door to summon his mother. Neighbors poured outside, some in confusion, some in terror. The air that moments before rang with childish laughter now pulsed with cries of panic and disbelief. Julian lay on the ground, gasping for air. His friends hovered, afraid to touch him but unwilling to leave his side. Adults scrambled for towels, for anything to press against the wound, their hands shaking as they tried to slow the bleeding. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The sight was surreal. A boy, no older than 11, fighting for life on a suburban sidewalk. Mothers clutched their own children, horrified. Fathers shouted at Leon, demanding to know why he had fired. Leon, for his part, stood on his porch, the gun still in his hand, his face unreadable. Some witnesses recalled anger flashing across his features. Others saw something like shock. But no expression could erase what had been done. When paramedics arrived, they moved with trained urgency. They lifted Julian carefully, worked to keep his airway open, rushed him into the ambulance. His mother arrived just in time to climb in with him, her cries audible to everyone standing on the street. But despite desperate efforts at the hospital, the wound was too severe. Julian Guzman was pronounced dead. Police officers wasted no time taking Leon into custody. He was charged with murder, his firearm confiscated, his home taped off as a crime scene. Detectives interviewed children, neighbors, anyone who had seen or heard what happened. The cell phone video taken by one of the children captured enough of the chaos to confirm the sequence of shots. A warning shot into the air, then a second aimed at the fleeing children. Yet, shockingly, within days, Leon was released. A judge set bond at $1 million, and Leon posted it. The man who had killed an 11-year-old was free to return home to the same neighborhood, to the same streets where the tragedy had unfolded. For Julian's family, the release was a punch to the gut. His mother spoke through tears, condemning the system that allowed her son's killer to walk free before trial. She vowed that she would not let her son's death be forgotten. The heart of this story lies in the grief of Julian's mother. In interviews, she struggled to articulate the pain of losing a child so young, so suddenly, and in such senseless circumstances. She described Julian as her light, the boy who still slept with his favorite blanket, who loved pizza and video games, who teased his cousins but always made them laugh. He was just a kid, she said, her voice breaking. He was playing. He wasn't doing anything wrong. She could not understand how anyone could see a group of laughing children as a threat. She could not understand how a system could allow a man accused of such recklessness to return home while her son lay in a grave. She launched a petition calling for justice, for stronger gun control, for recognition that what happened to Julian was not an accident, it was a preventable tragedy. Her words resonated across Houston, across Texas, and beyond. They became the voice of a community grappling with questions bigger than one crime. Julian's death ignited a national debate. Texas, known for its expansive self-defense laws, became the focus of scrutiny. The Castle Doctrine, intended to protect homeowners from real threats, was not written with ding-dong ditch in mind. Could Leon truly claim self-defense against laughing children? Legal experts argued that his first shot into the air demonstrated he did not believe he was under immediate threat. The second shot, the one that killed Julian, was, in prosecutors' eyes, nothing short of reckless homicide. Commentators on both sides of the gun debate weighed in. Supporters of stricter gun control argued that this was yet another example of why firearms should not be so easily accessible. Advocates of self-defense laws counted that homeowners must have the right to protect themselves. Yet even many of them struggled to defend Leon's actions. The tragedy forced Americans to confront a haunting question. In a society armed to the teeth, can children even afford to make mistakes anymore? In Julian's neighborhood, grief took physical form. Candlelight vigils filled the nights. Flowers and stuffed animals covered the spot where Julian had fallen. Families gathered, holding their own children tighter, whispering prayers for a boy taken too soon. Teachers organized memorials at school, where Julian's empty desk became a daily reminder of absence. Children were afraid. Parents warned them not to play pranks, not to knock on doors, not to stray too far from home. The innocence of summer nights was shattered. The laughter that once defined the block was replaced by silence, interrupted only by murmurs of disbelief. As prosecutors prepared their case, Leon's defense centered on fear. His attorneys argued that he believed intruders were outside, that his reaction was impulsive, that he did not intend to kill a child. But prosecutors pointed to the evidence: the warning shot, the aimed shot, the statements from witnesses, the video recording. They painted Leon as reckless, irresponsible, a man whose choices destroyed a child's life and shattered a family. The trial, scheduled for October, promised to be a battleground not only for Leon's fate, but for the larger question of where self-defense ends and vigilantism begins. Julian's tragedy did not exist in isolation. Across America, similar incidents echoed the same theme: children and young people killed for mistakes that should never have been fatal. In Missouri, Ralph Yarl, a teenager, was shot for knocking on the wrong door. In New York, Kaylin Gillis was killed after her friends accidentally pulled into the wrong driveway. Each case underscored the dangers of a culture where fear and guns intertwine. Julian's name joined theirs, another life lost, another cautionary tale. Together, these cases painted a picture of a nation at a crossroads. At Julian's funeral, the church overflowed with mourners. Photographs of him smiling, playing, wearing his favorite clothes adorned the walls. His friends placed handwritten notes and drawings in his casket, tokens of childhood innocence that should have stretched for decades longer. His family vowed that his story would not be forgotten. They spoke of justice, of change, of ensuring no other family endured the same pain. For them, Julian's laughter would never return. But his memory could serve as a warning, a rallying cry, a reminder of the price of recklessness. The tragedy of Julian Guzman forces us to reckon with the fragility of childhood and the consequences of fear. A knock on a door, a childish prank, became a death sentence. A man's decision to pull a trigger transformed a neighborhood, a family, and a nation's conscience. This is not just a story about one boy. It is a story about the choices we make in moments of tension, about the systems we build around fear, about the lives lost when judgment falters. It is a story of how innocence can be destroyed in a heartbeat, and how justice, though slow, must speak for those silenced too soon. Julian's laughter should still echo in the streets of Houston. Instead, it lingers only in memory, in photographs, in the aching hearts of those who loved him. His story is now ours to carry, a reminder of what is at stake when fear replaces reason, when guns replace words, when children cannot be children without risking their lives. Thank you for watching. For more deep dives into cases where crime, justice, and systemic failure collide, subscribe to the channel True Crime Spectrum.